You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We love MotoGP. Hello and welcome to Missed Apex MotoGP Podcast. This is a show put together by MotoGP enthusiasts pretending to be experts. We aim to have a race review show ready for a midweek commute. We may not be bike races, but we love it. The hot and steamy Malaysian weather serves us up some hot and steamy on-track action as the title rivals went handlebar to handlebar. Jorge Martin has one hand on the trophy, but for now at least, we will be heading to the final round showdown. I am your host, Kyle Power, and today I'm joined in my virtual shed by some fellow MotoGP enthusiasts. It's our lovable co-host, Jules Seegers. How's it going, Jules?
Hi, Kyle. I'm not sure if I'm deflated because of how the title fight went this weekend or still enthusiastic about that it's not over yet.
I feel it. I think let's be enthusiastic for this show at least, and then we could be deflated next race maybe. We're also joined in the shed by Danny Henney. How's it going, Danny?
Yeah, good, Kyle. Glad to be here to talk over this race, and oh my God, what some talking points we've got to go over.
Absolutely, and to join us to go over those talking points is the tyre-obsessed trumpeter, Matt Trumpets. How's it going, Matt?
My long-term bet on the universe continues to pay out. I have mostly recovered from the first 4 laps of the race.
Me too, yeah. There was a few messages flying around during that. My heart rate was through the roof. So before we got to that, we're coming into the weekend with Jorge Martin with a 17-point lead over Bagnaia, looking pretty comfortable. But somebody who was looking very comfortable coming into this weekend and through practice was Bagnaia himself. Bagnaia was looking quick. Like during practice, guys, I thought he was just going to dominate the weekend from here on in. He was looking so quick. He led every single session going up to qualifying, and it didn't look like we were going to have any GP23s in the mix at all because they were really struggling for straight line speed, to the point that Pecco actually said in an interview to Marquez, he sort of overheard him saying, your bike's really slow this weekend. So I don't know why that was. That was a bit odd. So, but wow, what a job Bagnaia was doing during practice and laying down a marker for Jorge. Danny?
Yeah, it's funny because I'd said going into the weekend that obviously I'd put my money on the beast, like dominating, if you will, through the races, and I expected Bagnaia to struggle. But yeah, he kind of turned the form book on its head, really, because, you know, as I said, I thought the beast was going to be there. Martin's kind of got the momentum going in through the practice session. Bagnaia's not really looked on it the last couple of weekends, so it was good to see him get on the pace early on, and boy, did he set it up for what we were about to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good point about the last couple of weekends. It has very much seemed like Bagnaia on the back foot going in, but this time he was very much on the front foot and the offensive. So the pace was ridiculous. Qualifying was just crazy. They first go in, Jules. I was just amazed to see them improving that much.
Yeah, and actually during the Friday practice qualifying directly for Q2, Bagnaia left it really late because he was fastest with an immense time, but it occurred to me that he had, during that session, Martin was out on with a medium front and a medium rear while everybody was lapping the soft fronts. And Bagnaia was, coming in, coming out, like we indeed have seen him in recent weekends as well, talking to the Michelin guy. And then when he went out for his actual first flying lap with only 20 minutes to go, he immediately set a blasting time. While Jorge Martin was already, or still, doing lap after lap after lap on the medium front, medium rear. And I put that in my notes because I thought that's peculiar because nobody's doing that. And it turned out later in the weekend it would be of use for him. But yeah, the quality was great. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but the Yamahas, they were doing quality pretty well too.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the Yamaha is sort of turning into the feel-good story of the end of the season here, that the concessions, again, we sort of mentioned this on the last show, but it seems like in a broader sense, the Dorna's plan to bring everyone back into the fold and make them feel like they're at least dipping their toe into those competitive waters has paid off. And over the course of a single season, that, from a technical point of view, isn't a guarantee, even with the concessions they got. But what struck me, as Jules saying, it was unusual for Martin to be out there banging in race laps when everybody else was looking to qualify and be able to miss Q1. I don't think so. I think going into it, and we'll talk about it more later, I think going into it, Pramac now has an entirely different set of strategic goals. And their only concern was how the performance in the race on Sunday was going to be for Martin, because they have a lead they're trying to protect. And fundamentally, that's a different mindset than I'm trying to catch you from behind. And that will play out as we talk about the whole weekend, I believe.
Yeah, that is a good point that we will talk about a bit later because, to quote Danny Henney from the last show, maybe Pramac and Martin are playing the championship leader cards straight from the off in practice, but any cards played weren't going to do anything about a 56.3, which is absolutely insane. If you've been watching MotoGP for a fair few years, you kind of start to build up a good handle on lap times. And I remember it wasn't that long ago when sub 2 minutes was incredible around Malaysia, and a 56.3 for Bagnaia is just eye-watering. That's 1.1 seconds faster than last year. That's absolutely mental. So yeah, incredible pole position from Bagnaia, laying a marker down. So Bagnaia gets pole, Martin is second. Trumpets friend Alex Marquez in third, Morbidelli, Marc Marquez only in fifth, and Bastianini, the biggest surprise here, and the biggest sort of damp squib really was Bastianini is sixth, as Danny was saying. We thought he was going to come in and be the fastest round. I think we've all said that in the last couple of shows. We're expecting Bastianini to be here, and Bagnaia really wanted him up there, obviously, to support him. Not that Bastianini said he was going to support him anyway, but you always want another teammate in there. So that set up a delicious prospect for the sprint. So on to the sprint then, and this looked like it was drama before it was even going to start. There was a rain in the air, it was damp, the track looked tricky, it was still swelteringly hot. But what was swelteringly hot definitely was Jorge Martin's start. As we've seen so many times, he gets the whole shot on Bagnaia, just gets into the lead, and then just starts pulling away and putting loads of pressure on Bagnaia and making Bagnaia have to push. It goes, Trumpets, were you surprised to see Martin, having just said, they're sort of setting up for trying to maybe play a bit safe? Were you surprised to see Martin shooting off like a scolded cat?
Well, yeah and no. I mean, I think the answer is always, especially in MotoGP, it's such an advantage to be in front in the clean air. And so I'm not surprised to see him going for it, especially at turn one, because almost the worst case scenario there is, because he's on the inside, is he just takes both of them out, and that still advantage him. So he very much in that tiny little window where he got ahead, he didn't really have much to lose relative to Bagnaia. And the thing that I wanted to talk about, though, and this is always an interesting thing to me, is that pole position sets up fundamentally on the outside of the track. And I know that's the racing line, and they do that because supposedly you have better traction there. But I would swear across all the series I watch, it's almost never an advantage to be on the outside and start. And if that's where pole position, it's always the inside person who winds up getting a good enough run to make life difficult for the pole sitter. And I think that's really, Martin did get a slightly better jump, but his real advantage was strategic in that he was already there and Bagnaia was going to have to deal with him.
I like this version of Martin, I must admit. He's gone all aggressive on us in the last couple of weeks, really trying to force the issue. I was a bit concerned he hadn't really got it in him, if I'm honest, as we watch over the last two seasons, but I think he's really stepped it up in the last couple of races, especially the last time out. He's throwing it at Bagnaia, risking to go down on the deck. Again, he put a forceful move on at the start of the sprint race and tried to rough him up. And obviously, we've seen a bit more of it in the feature as well. But I think he's really stepped it up. It's actually made me like him even more because I think it's showing how much he actually wants that championship and kind of shows that he recognises this is probably his one and only shot for quite a while.
Yeah, he's not being subdued about it, is he? Or shy. He's not just slipping in within his shell and just cruising back, because he could just afford to just sit behind Bagnaia constantly. But no, seems like the only way he knows how to go and do it is to go out there, get your elbows out and fight. And he was setting a blistering pace. I believe the first lap there was straight into the 57s. It was just like boom, like almost quali pace. I mean, a lot of riders on the grid would have dreamed to have that as quali pace and to go straight in, and with rain in the air and tricky conditions, he was laying it all on the line, and that was forcing Bagnaia to have to really get on it, really push. And you could see the gap they were starting to stretch from the field already. The pace was electric until we get to lap 3, going into turn 9, and disaster. Bagnaia tucks the front and goes down, and I couldn't believe it. At the time, I was watching it live on board with Marquez, and I actually said to myself out loud, you saw the amount of time that Marquez took out of Bagnaia on the brakes, as he tends to do. I thought Marquez was closing in way too quickly, and I actually said, Marquez is down. He's going to go down and tuck the front, and I couldn't believe when we saw it was Bagnaia in front of us that actually went down. So guys, what do you think happened here, Jules?
You could indeed see Marquez closing in really, really fast, but the lap before that, so lap 2, in that exact turn 9, Bagnaia had a bit of a wobble going out of that turn, and it was almost like a high sider in early stages. Not bad, because the speed is relatively low there, but he didn't have a clean exit there, and he would explain afterwards that made him enter turn 9 on lap 3 differently, because he was being cautious. And he said, I turned in with a little less speed, and to make sure I don't get in trouble with exiting. But because he had less speed going in, of course, making that turn was different for him as well. And he actually had to lean in more than he was used to. And then he got on some sort of rough patch. One says it was a different tarmac patch. The other says it was a bit of a wobble on the white line on the apex of that turn. But whatever happened, it was just a bit of a wobble, too much. And he said, I took that turn 100 times like that and nothing happened. But well, you always see. And there he was. And it was for me, it was like everything turned quiet. And it was like, wait a minute, you realize, but guys, this is it. It's pretty much over now. While we were all, at least I can only speak for myself, we were all just, pumping ourselves for like, yeah, this is going to go down the wire, and we're going to have whatever final round, wherever it's going to be. And all of a sudden it wasn't. And I never, even despite Bagnaia not being strong in sprints overall this season, I never saw this one coming. Maybe I was naive, but.
Oh, I don't think anybody saw this coming. And the thing that I love about MotoGP is that you can literally do everything right, and that can still happen. There's always an element of extra jeopardy involved. And, it's just one of those things. At a higher speed, that same patch of tarmac isn't going to displace the wheels in exactly the same way. But because he was a little slower, he was taking a slightly different angle. And I know there will always be an argument about what it is. I do not think Bagnaia made a mistake. I don't think Ducati made a mistake. I think it's just one of those things that can happen. It's just the exact wrong speed, the exact patch of tarmac. You set up a little vibration, that rear wheel lifts a little bit too much. There's suddenly too much weight on the front, and bang, no one's going to save that.
I think on the incident itself, for me, it was a Bagnaia mistake. But I think what it does show is how many times have we spoken about racing that when you're on the absolute limit, you're focused, you make minimal mistakes. I think the fact that he backed off and was trying to take it easy and work himself into the race is what probably costed him, really, because as you say, he's gone in a bit slower, trying to be a bit safer, and the front's just tucked. He's obviously not expecting it to move and just hit the deck quicker than obviously he could react to it. But a shame to see happen. But yeah, for me, it was just a silly mistake from Bagnaia, unfortunately.
Guys, do you think it wouldn't have happened if Marquez wouldn't have been able to follow them so closely? Because it felt to me that it was rather a case of Marquez being closer to Bagnaia at that point than Bagnaia being closer to Jorge Martin. And I thought, is he getting wound up by Marquez pushing him? He's going to hear him. Because as Carl said, he was especially entering that turn. Marquez was really near him. He must have heard him. He must have felt it. And I was wondering, would have it made a difference? But because the last thing he would want was give up a place to Marquez, while the only thing that was good enough for him was just make up places on Jorge Martin, make up points. And I wondered, would it have made any difference?
I'm not sure because, well, Marquez has said he wants Bagnaia to win, and he's kind of inferred that he didn't want to mess around too much with the title fight. But that's a good point, Jules. Like, yeah, he would have heard him behind him. Marquez was closing at a great rate of knots, but I think he got it right the first time. I think he said he was being a little bit more cautious. He's turned in too tight, and what I could see was because he turned in super tight, there's a tiny bump just on the edge of the white line. He's hit that bump that he says hitting loads, and that, oddly, sometimes, as Matt said, sometimes you can do the same thing time and time again, and they're so on the edge, and he's hit that bump, and it's just caused a strange oscillation. And people familiar with engineering and oscillation and vibrations, you'll get harmonics, and they've heard chatter before, which Rossi struggled with in 2006. The frame hit a harmonic, and it was just setting off vibrations. We've tried to explain this before. He just hit the bump, and Danny, it set off a weird vibration. You can see it oscillating in the front, just got bigger, and then just tucked the front. So I'd put that down as I'd defend Pekka here. I think that's more bad luck than it is a mistake.
I don't know. I think I'm going to stick with he made a mistake. It's better talking points, isn't it? Just to jump back to the Marc Marquez point, though, I think you're right, Jules. Usually he is super aggressive. What surprised me with him is how respectful he was during that race, because there was a few times he could have gone for a very aggressive move and probably chucked it at Bagnaia a few times. I think I messaged you then, Kyle, saying, this is kind of shocking me, actually. Yeah. He's being very respectful, staying out the battle. So if Bagnaia did hit the deck because he was putting him off, it's even more on him, to be fair, because obviously he needs to be in front and really he should be focusing on Martin, not looking behind or thinking what's coming.
Well, what I like about this is it just brings us right back to practice and qualifying. I mean, the 23 bike is slower. I mean, yeah, he could make that move somewhere in the second sector, but he's just going to lose it in the third sector on the long straights. And I think Marquez is smart enough to know that he might be able to defend for a lap or two, but fundamentally, he knew the performance of the bike wouldn't get him to the end of the sprint race. And so maybe it's just him acknowledging that fact. Like, what he's trying to do is hang on to that battle to get pulled away from the rest of the pack, to use the slipstream to make up for his lack of performance on the long straights. Now, did his presence there, whether or not Bagnaia would admit it, or whether or not we could even tell, did that impact how he went into that corner? Well, maybe. Even if he knew it was Marquez, he doesn't know for sure Marquez won't make a move, and he's close enough for him to sense him. Yeah, maybe that played a part. But fundamentally, I'm just like, oh, instead of a 500th of a second, that contact patch, it was a 250th of a second. And that was just enough to tuck the front.
Yeah, absolutely. Excuses for the listeners for some tech issues we are having there. Hopefully that will come back and sort itself out. Yeah, I don't think Marquez had an influence on it. I think it was just super unlucky from Bagnaia. They were on the limit, they were pulling away. But all of this meant that, I feel a bit like how Jules felt initially when I was like, oh no, I was like mad. Like, you know, I've got a preference. I think I want Martin to win the championship, but I like all the rides. I'm not against any of them. So I was just a bit like, no, the battle's been like, the battle's gone and surely that's it. It's over this. And then that Marquez is not going to have the pace on the GP23 to challenge Martin. And then it was just a mental game for Martin, I bet, just to keep his head in the game, not throw it down the road. It was still tricky, but he was still making me nervous in the braking zones. He still looked like he was pushing really, really hard. So then he just had to manage the gap. So with all of the attention sort of gone at the front, it left sort of Martin out front with Marquez in second, and Bastianini managed to get his way up to third, which is looking really good. But behind them, Acosta and Miller were having a right ding dong. So they had a massive Acosta versus Miller take two, and a little nod to Miller's tweet last week he put out. I really like his attitude in that. So that's really good. But anyway, championship lead now up to 29 points. Martin comes screaming home with an emphatic victory. And the celebrations were a little bit subdued. And we haven't mentioned it yet. All our thoughts go out of everyone affected by the crisis happening in Spain at the moment. That's really bad, and that's ghastly. I think so. All of the celebrations were slightly subdued, but fair play from Todozzi. His rider didn't win, but he was down there celebrating and congratulating with the Pramac team. It's his bike as won, but not in his team, not the colour bike that he wanted to win, Jules.
Yeah, and the Pramac team principal, Gino Bossoy, earlier in the weekend already also mentioned to all of the media that he was so happy, of course, but really appreciated how they had all the Ducati support. I mean, we talked about it a few times before, that they have all the upgrades or updates available to the factory team. But I think the way he expressed his gratitude for that, his appreciation, I thought that was really good to see, because we know title fights in all different classes of motorsport, where things get really nasty and maybe even toxic, and title fights lead to all these kind of partisan stuff. And I thought it was just really suiting for the way Bahia and Martin go about it, that also the teams and the factory of Ducati just keep it 100% clean.
Yeah, I think Ducati are a real respectable team when you look at how they do. Really classy, I think, on how they go about things. They could have played any number of games, and even the commentators were on about it quite a lot. They could have done something to his bike, not given him an upgrade, made it different. They fully supported both riders to have the best chance at this championship. And it's really showed a difference between them and their four-wheel counterpart, I'd say, on how they go about things. I think Ducati can hold their head very high on how they've approached this championship to give it a fair battleground, should I say.
Yeah, that's very well said. And they have denying the frame to Bagnaia and everything. Fair play. There's been me playing devil's advocate on this podcast saying I think they're going to do something to screw them up. Surely they're going to do something. I mean, they still have time. There's still time. I still think in the back of my head.
Not just you, man. Not just you.
Yeah, it's you as well. Yeah, just everyone I still think is thinking surely they're going to do something, but they're not even employing team orders at the moment. So, and it is absolutely completely fair play. So last year we had the dodgy tyre in Qatar, didn't we, from our team, which sort of ended it. That set the conspiracy theories off, and those wrinkles of tin. You can hear the tinfoil crinkling everywhere. But actually, yeah, fair play, and it is really classy of them. So that was really good. So that wraps up the sprint. But one other little notable point in there was Fabio Quartararo coming home in fifth on the Yamaha, and that's not even with the good new engine, because he blew it up. So he was on the old spec bike as well. So getting fifth place, that was absolutely amazing, and that was the first time that a Japanese bike has been the best non-Ducati, which is quite incredible, really, right at the end of the season. But there we are. So 29 points. It's not all over yet. Bagnaia had a huge task on his hand heading into the Grand Prix. So on to the Grand Prix, and this was a bit of a different affair from the sprint, and I'm going to waste no time focusing in the first topic, those opening laps, guys. I mean, I was levitating off the sofa. My heart rate was through the roof. My Fitbit reckoned I've consumed many hundred calories just watching those laps alone. That was incredible. Was anybody else getting some shades of 2015? This was like a well-mannered 2015, Danny.
Yeah, very much so, wasn't it? It was incredible. Absolutely incredible. Literally, from the moment the lights went out, they were at each other. I think what surprised me is I was expecting Bagnaia to kind of go, well, I'm not playing this game till later on in the race, and kind of let him have it and settle in and think, I'll wait to see how the race pans out, then I'll go at you. But he just went back at it. It was like a Rocky fight. It was like, bang, I'll hit you, you fight back. He went through. Super impressive. Some of the best racing I have seen for years, I'd say. So, yeah, reminiscent of 2015, but a lot more respectful, and no one got a boot, should I say.
Well, I think several people got a boot, including Martin, into the first turn. But I got to say that normally when I watch races, I keep notes on a notepad. And when we got to lap 5, I looked down and I'd written exactly one word that I cannot repeat in this show. Because I have never, I mean, with Danny, I haven't been watching MotoGP as long as the rest of you have. But I have never seen 2 title contenders with everything to lose have that kind of racing. And especially because it's a long race, man. You got so much to manage and it's hot out there. And there was no quarter given on either side. And it was beautiful to see.
Absolutely. It was epic. And this is what we've been waiting for all year, isn't it? So we've been saying it because we haven't really seen Bagnaia versus Martin in a massive sort of showdown, but there were proper like whacking handlebars. And so I think it was counted. I think it was 11 position swaps in 3 laps. There was just one would go, then the next one would just instantly counter attack. And my favorite ones were that massive off camber final corner. They were going in so deep. And I just thought at any point, one of them was just going to tuck the front. And well, really, Jules, Bagnaia's got nothing to lose here almost. His back's against the wall. Like Martin had everything to lose. If you're in this position, would you have put it on the line as much as that?
I definitely wouldn't. And I still don't really understand it. I mean, both of them explained their tactics and why they went about it like they did. And still, I think, but why did you take so much risk? He must have thought, if I go down, then probably I take Bagnaia with me, or he knocks me off, and we're both out. And of course, that wouldn't have mattered for Jorge Martin. But it struck me as he wanted to make this the fight that this championship deserves, and he wouldn't give in. And I was trying to keep up with notes, and I put down that Jorge, he just seemed faster. Like every time you went on board with Jorge, you were like, oh, he's just biding his time, and he's gonna put it alongside Bagnaia whenever he wants. And it was sort of like that, but he couldn't keep hardly any of the turns he tried, because he kept going wide. And so it was like he had too much pace, but he couldn't make it happen before he would run into front tire issues, which we all already hear a lot about for 2 seasons now. And he just had to like pause his attempts, and then the gap was there for Bagnaia, which I thought was impressive how quickly he pulled that gap. But it made me wonder, and I don't know what you guys think about this, but the amount of times that Jorge Martin tried to overtake him, but he misjudged it almost every time, and he went wide. It made me wonder, like, is that maybe Jorge Martin's last weak spot, like man-to-man battle? Is that maybe the thing that he isn't as good as, because he kept sort of misjudging these attempts? Or was he just trying to, keep Bagnaia on edge?
Danny, then Trumpets.
I wouldn't say he was misjudging it. I think he was just chucking the bike at him, to be honest, Jules. I don't think he was misjudging the attack. I think he knew exactly what he was doing. But just going back to the point where you say he was a bit surprised on how aggressive it was, I wasn't. When you look at the points, if he could have got that pulled off and beat Bagnaia again, he was so close to pretty much wrapping up the championship. He could afford to hit the deck. He could have a really bad... He could have finished, I don't know what the maths are, but maybe 10th or 11th or something. So putting myself in his shoes, would I do it normally? no, I probably wouldn't. In the championships I've been in, I like to usually think of the bigger picture. But if there was a chance I could get it wrapped up, your natural instinct kicks in. You're a racer. You would be going, this is so easy. And if you're confident that you think you can get in front and pull away, you would go for it. So it was, it was interesting from Martin. I wasn't surprised, and it was good to see him go at it.
Well, what I love about this is, as you watched, what I began to realize in this battle was that Bagnaia had a fundamental advantage in the braking zone. And that was why you could see Martin look quicker. Because I think if Bagnaia wasn't there and you just said, go, run the fastest laps you can, I think Martin might have actually been just a whisker faster. But where it mattered, the Ducati and Bagnaia were faster on the brakes. He was later on the brakes, and he was able to, on that final pass, he was able to essentially make the same move that Martin was making, but hang it around the inside. And I can't believe it's going to come down to me to bring up the fact that they weren't running the same front tire. And it's very easy to just say, well, exactly right there is your margin of performance difference.
Do explain, Matt. Do explain. What were the tire choices?
Well, as I recall, it was soft for Bagnaia and it was a medium for Martin. And that would give you, especially at the start of a race, an advantage on traction and an advantage on braking and an advantage on grip. But you would expect that to disappear over the course of a race. Now, I did notice one other thing. They also, I know they went back out, but they did come to the grid and have that moment, that minute of silence.
Yeah.
Which they don't normally do. I don't know if the engineers took into an account they would be parked for that extra length of time. I don't know whether or not it made a difference.
So they should have been okay.
Yeah, but I just put it out there for people who want to consider such minutia. And then just the whole start of the race itself was kind of crazy. But what I get to fundamentally is, I think Pramac made their tire choice based on a different kind of thinking, which is we're defending a lead, whereas I think Ducati were making their tire choice based on we have no choice because we're chasing. We have to get in front. And you saw that play out over those first laps.
Yeah. Well, if you saw Jorge Martin racing, then he must not have gotten that memo like, we're trying to defend the lead here. Because I loved how he went for it. And I loved, because it's exactly what Matt says. Entering the final turn 15, Bagnaia was so strong on braking and entering that turn. And I was thinking, is this like maybe my new favorite corner of the calendar, bar Phillip Island? Okay, I'll give everyone that. But I mean, you can take it in so many ways. And I loved it how Bagnaia would look like he was getting the best of Martin, but then Martin, his thing is not breaking into the corner, but exiting out of it. And he had so much speed, and then they almost touched, and then you thought like, oh well, they'll probably take it easy now. And then a couple of turns later, in turn 5, Martin had that very surprising great overtake on Bagnaia, and he had P1 again. But I love that final turn. For me, I'm going to pick a different moment of the weekend, but thing of the weekend for me is turn 15, no doubt.
Nice, a bit premature there, but it's hard to argue against that one. I think Martin's favourite corner was turn 14 before that. So that was the Rossi Marquez corner, because I think it's twice or 2 or 3 times he did it. He just let the brake off and just sent it up the inside. And that's another, this track is absolutely brilliant for motorcycle racing and also for the fans. You can see they had like a sellout crowd most of the weekend. There was like over 300,000, I think, there over the weekend, which is crazy. You can see why they totally lost their love for Formula One, and who wouldn't if you're not getting great races there. But they embrace MotoGP, which is absolutely brilliant. And this circuit just works for the multi lines coming in. But one of the major factors I think was played into this and them battling and scrapping so hard, and actually it was Luca Marini of all people who said it at the end, was it's the temperatures were so bad, was so insane that it was a disaster to follow. If you follow another bike for a lap, he said your front tire pressure went through the roof, and also you're being boiled in your levers essentially with the hot exhaust things. Like when I used to be a marshal, I've marshaled MotoGP a few times. I've picked up a few MotoGP bikes that have been broken and stood there holding them. One even I actually sat on because I was being a bit cheeky. The heat coming off of these things is unbelievable. So when you're already in, mid 30s and sweltering and the humidity, you don't want to follow another bike. So they were both mega desperate just to get out and to get some clear air. But I'm amazed that Martin was taking those risks, man.
Well, yeah, and this is the thing this is the defense of my Pramac theory here, which is fundamentally by having the medium tire. Later in the race, you had more margin for whatever happened at the beginning of the race, and you had more margin for what happened at the beginning as well. But what you didn't have was that last tiny bit of performance that the soft tire gives you. So Pramac is essentially saying, yeah, go for it, don't go for it. But we want you to have a tire that mid to end of the race gives you a bigger margin, either to chase or just to bring it home in one piece. It's not going to give up even if you're stuck behind Bagnaia. And on that theory, I think they made the absolute right choice because that is kind of the way it worked out.
See, normally it's more decided the tyre by the rider. Would you agree, Kyle? I think it's more rider preference, isn't it? What chooses and how the bike's handling, would I say, with the tyre choice rather than the team. But it's an interesting thing what you bring up, Trumpets.
Yeah, it generally is, but they will be influenced by a team decision. The team manager will be like, right, I want you to maybe a bit safer here. And more often than not, we've heard them choosing a different construction purely on the feeling it gives them under braking because the construction's slightly different. So we'll slightly different. But this time, I think there is some truth in what Trumpets is saying here, which is I do think it was maybe more of a cautious thing. And with the heat, particularly, I think they were going for longevity rather than feeling and just the construction under braking. Jules, very, very smart.
Yeah, and just in support of Matt, as mentioned earlier when we were discussing practice qualifying, eventually what Martin did on the Saturday, just doing lap after lap after lap as the only one with the medium front, it must have been a plan indeed, because else he wouldn't have spent so much time of the pre-quali practice doing that.
And I'll just finish up by adding that there were those few laps where he went back down to like 1.5 seconds behind Bagnaia, where you're like, oh, this was the plan all along. But it was a little too much to ask, I think, in those conditions for the tire to perform the way it was needed to. And when he had that one big where he went wide and just about lost it, he was like, yeah, no, that's enough for me. You could see him. He shook his head. He's like, okay, yeah, no, I've gotten too ambitious here. I need to just dial it back a little bit.
Well, we were going to talk about it a little bit later. We might as well talk about it now because there's and we'll wrap this into the second point, which is I was actually quite impressed with Bagnaia. Basically, it's like the epitome of this championship. Like, he seems to make a mistake on Saturday, but then back against the wall and did what he needed to do on the Sunday, and he took it to Martin, and he chose the softer tire, a bit more of the racier option, and is gone off. But that's a good point that Matt makes, because coming to the end of the race, Martin starts to turn the screw and it does start to come on, and it was not Martin picking up his pace. I think it was Bagnaia's pace dropping off a bit. So I think he just started to hit the limit on that tire, and he was maybe just starting to get a few front locks going on, and Martin just managed to basically hold his same pace all the way through to the end, and he was doing it, which meant he didn't really back off. But further again backs up Trumpet's sort of tire theory there, but it was playing into fruition at the end, and I was a little bit gutted. I thought, surely not. He's surely not going to catch him and then go for a crazy semi-desperate lunge into the last couple of corners, because as Danny said earlier, a really good point of you want to get it as wrapped up as possible to take as much possible pressure off yourself. And after the sprint, I actually wrote in my notes that he's bought himself a free mistake, he was 29 points now. So even if he dropped it in the main Grand Prix, he was still going to come out of a 4-point lead. So yeah, he bought himself a mistake. So it's basically mistake buying he could have had. But yeah, like I said, he made the mistake in that dreaded turn 9 again. And yeah, you could tell he was a bit annoyed. But on Bagnaia, I was quite impressed about how he went about this. And he had just had one objective, and that was to win the race. But there was a side quest here of he maybe could have interfered with Jorge Martin a bit. He wanted his teammate. He wanted other people in the mix. He wanted people between him and Martin. So, guys, I'm going to ask a question here. Do you think he maybe should have backed it off and tried to back Martin into Marquez and then into the pack? Danny?
Yes. I'd say I think that's the smart move to put him back into the pack. The only challenge to that is watching, obviously, MotoGP and them on the bikes. It's extremely difficult to do that with how, wide the bikes are. It's not like in car racing where you can kind of cover the track quite a lot, make it difficult for your competitor to get past. The bikes are a bit more harder. I know it's harder to get by in some instances, especially now they've got a bit more of the aero, but in theory, yes, he should have done it. Could he have done it and been successful and still been beaten Jorge Martin? I'm not so sure, because I think if he'd have backed him in, obviously Marquez hit the deck later on, but if he'd have backed him in early, it could have worked out and backfired for him, because Martin could have got past. Marquez potentially gets past. He's then in third. He's got a battle with a wild Marquez or a Bezzecchi or an Acosta or something. So I think in theory it was the right thing to do, but in hindsight, he probably did the best option and tailed it up the road and got out there and collected the points.
Yeah, and don't forget, this is, especially bike riding, it is so much of a rhythm you get into. And you mess with that rhythm at your absolute peril. Now, from a pure tactical point of view, if you are so in your rhythm, you're like, I can lose 3/10 and be fine. And then maybe I put him into my thermal exhaust, put him in that thermal layer. Maybe I make the air dirty for him. Maybe that forces him to back off to where Marquez can catch him. Well, if you have that kind of control, that's fine. But given the fight they had at the beginning, the last thing I'd want to do if I was Bagnaia would be let Martin get anywhere near me once again. And I think you saw Martin back off to save his tire. And, Marquez was there or thereabouts, but he was only there or thereabouts by some insane grace of talent, because the bike itself, as we clearly saw about halfway through the race, the bike itself was not going to be able to keep up for the whole Grand Prix.
Yeah, and then with, I don't know how many, I think maybe halfway down the race, I forgot what lap, Marquez crashed. It was just one of those crashes that we saw so many times of him this weekend, and he couldn't explain it himself. So, but back to the question, because I got distracted. But I don't see how that could have worked, because backing Martin up to Bastianini, who was third by that point, the gap between them was like 6 seconds. So that would have taken a lot of backing up Jorge Martin. I don't think Jorge would have waited for that, and he would just took a chance with Bagnaia. So I must admit there was a short moment when I thought that Bagnaia was doing that, because he was 2 seconds ahead of Martin, and then all of a sudden within one lap he lost like 0.6. And I thought, is his soft tire dropping off? Is this going to be Martin with his medium front coming good? But then Martin kind of took the bait, which wasn't really a bait, but he made a mistake pushing to close the gap further, and that was it. Then he decided to cease fire and take second place.
Yeah, that's true, and that's all wise. And Marquez himself, to try and debunk my sort of theory there, I would have loved to see Bagnaia try to do some funny business. Try to do it. We saw it with Lorenzo back in 2013. Tried it. We've seen it before. People did, but as Danny said, it's really hard to do on a bike. You don't have mirrors. People can overtake you, and we just said at the start, you don't particularly want to be following people, but is desperate. His back's against the wall. He might as well try to do something, but Marquez actually kind of debunked the theory a bit like Jules did, saying, well, the pace at the front, and this is complete hats off to the top two, even though they were battling super hard, the pace was still insane. And Marquez was just like, I couldn't get involved even if I wanted to. I couldn't catch them. I had a grandstand seat to watch it, but he just shows like how quick they were. And they were still ripping away from the rest of the pack, still battling. It's just absolutely amazing. And I'm going to play my Formula One reference card here. This reminded me back of the early, year 2000 with Schumacher versus Hakkinen, and they were just leagues ahead of their teammates. And they were just two of the championship rivals going out at it. We've seen this in MotoGP with Rossi versus Stoner before. I think there's some Rossi versus Gibernau battles where it's just them two miles out in front. And I love seeing this. The championship contenders absolutely going for it, hammer and tongs. So the pace was absolutely amazing. But I don't know, I would have personally really liked to see Bagnaia back it off a little bit, Danny, and just I don't know, even if he lost a few positions, I think if I'm him in that situation, I want some chaos. I want to cause some chaos.
Yeah, you definitely do. It's the only card you've got to play, isn't it? Because it's a bit of the tortoise and the hare. You've got all the pace, but he can afford to finish right behind you in every race. So you winning every race is kind of irrelevant. You've got to cause a bit of chaos to get a gap between you to pull the points back. Now, the problem what Bagnaia had, just to pick up on Jules's point about using Bastianini is a bit of a nightmare teammate, really, isn't he? Because unless it's towards the end of the race when you need him, he's never there. You want a teammate at the start of the race who's with you, who's going to hold someone up so you can pull a gap and get away and drive off into the distance. Bastianini's brilliant if you're in a battle at the end of the race and he's managed to claw back the 40 seconds he's lost in the first 10 laps and get back up to you. So a difficult position for Bagnaia to be in. But I think you're right, Kyle. The only option he has got now is to try and get somebody else involved in that battle. And it's a bit of a shame because Marquez on the 23 bike is nowhere near the 24, depending on the circuit. But yeah, he ain't got many cards to play now, and it's kind of in the lap of the gods.
Yeah, see, to me, you just said the magic words, depending on the circuit. This was a circuit where Marquez was unlikely to have had a long-term effect on Martin. Even if he got in front of him, he wasn't going to stay there for the whole race, and everybody knew it. But also, we're not at that point because he's walking away with a thin enough margin that it's still a very very real possibility that Bagnaia can win this championship. And the time that you resort to, let's back people up, is when you're out of all your other options, I would argue. And so, yeah, if it gets to the last race on the Sunday and it's inside of 25 points, yeah, we might very well see that attempt from him.
That is a good point. Because with this, so with Bagnaia winning emphatically like he did, he's got it back within 24 points. 25 points for a Grand Prix win and obviously 12 for a sprint win. So it's very much still on. So they do have options. Listeners, you also have options as well. You have a wonderful option to follow us on Twitter, which would be lovely. That's at Mr. Apex Moto on Twitter, at Mr. Apex Moto, or email in some feedback. We've been having some feedback. Thank you very much for that. Very constructive. That's good. And we do read your emails and take it in mind. So you can send an email to mrapexmoto@gmail.com. That's mrapexmoto@gmail.com. Now, I want to ask my panelists some pure speculation and opinion piece. Who deserves it the most? We are going to get a final round, wherever that may be. It's all still a bit up in the air, so we are getting a final round. Who deserves it the most? Jorge Martin or Bagnaia? Danny, who and why?
This is difficult. I was in one camp totally until I seen the statistics earlier shared. So I'm going to say, for me, Jorge Martin. I'm going to stick with a man.
And Jules, why is that wrong or right?
For the sake of the game, I'm going to say it's wrong. Because real MotoGP racing is winning on the Sundays. And Bagnaia did a lot more of that than Jorge Martin. But do I really believe it?
He did. What are numbers? What are scores on the doors then? So he has won more Grand Prix than Martin has. Enlighten us.
Yeah, it's actually it's really crazy. It's almost bizarre how Jorge Martin is leading this championship by 24 points, as he only won 3 races this season on Sunday.
What?
Of which 2 came in, I think, the first 4 or 5 races of the season. And Bagnaia, as many know, has 10. With that Malaysia win, which is a big personal record for him. And how do you say this? Big riders before him did this as well. Although, there's a lot more races this season anyway. But 3 to 10. I mean, how can you not lead this championship? And that's where Bagnaia can point the finger at only one place, and that is the mirror. It's towards himself.
Yeah, how can he lead this race? How can he lead the championship? It's very easy. It's called math. Martin has scored more points across all of the race weekends, and significantly. And this is where I would disagree with you. And this is why I think Martin deserves it most. And maybe this is just my cycling background, where the person who wins the Tour de France or the Giro d'Italia is the person who has the lowest accumulated time across the entirety of the race. Oh, Bagnaia, yeah, he did have all those wins, but he had all those terrible finishes too. And Martin has just not shown us that. His basement has been so much higher than Bagnaia's across the season. That's why he's in the lead. It's very simple. And now that it's come down to it, he's shown us on track too that he is not He's not taking the safe, easy exit here. He's fighting for this tooth and nail. And I think he's just demonstrated a skill level that deserves championship palmares. And I'm hoping that's the way it turns out. But yeah, it's still in the fate of the racing gods could still play an ugly and cruel trick on us here. So I'm not going to put any money on it just yet.
Absolutely, yeah. We're kind of talking like it's almost over, and some crazy stats there, Jules. So 10 GP wins versus 3. And it does seem it's quite a while since Martin actually won a race. But this new era of MotoGP with the sprints, it's totally changed the dynamic. Because if it was just Grand Prix, Bagnaia would have been champion already. I think it would have been absolutely fine because he's definitely very much a Sunday man. But the whole dynamic has changed. You've got to look at it as a whole. So my personal opinion is, I think Martin deserves it, like really deserves it, particularly after the highs and lows of Mugello, after being essentially told he's got the factory ride that I think he should have maybe got the previous year as well. And he's upped his game. He's met all the questions being asked of him, to then have that cruelly taken away by Marquez playing the Big Daddy card, and then Ducati U-turning and leaving him out, dumped in the dry. Yeah, I think Martin thoroughly deserves it, Matt.
Yeah, and I want to pick up on this a little bit, and I'll try and be quick about it because I know that people get tired of listening to me talk endlessly. But to me, the difference here is somebody at Pramac sat down and ran a bunch of numbers and said, hey, wait a minute. We might not be optimizing our sprint performance in terms of overall championship abilities. Whereas Ducati, I feel like, suffers from what you see a lot, what I would call institutional inertia. Sunday has always been the day for them. And we see that on the Friday, and we see that on the Saturday, to the point where even Bagnaia is like, yeah, I think we're going to have to take a look and understand why we are lacking this performance on the Saturday. And I do. It's that institutional inertia. And I think Pramac was just lighter and quicker, and they figured it out, and they made it work this season. And I love that.
What this championship can be summed up really is it's proving that speed isn't enough. You need speed and consistency, because Bagnaia by far, as we've said, has had higher peaks. But Martin's been way more consistent over the year. Now, obviously, Bagnaia's hit the deck a lot more. But again, consistency includes not making mistakes. I think although I usually favour the rider or the competitor that has the more stats, but certainly in personal championships, that's why Carl's laughing with the different figures. I think Martin's been exceptional this year. As Kyle said, he summed it up perfectly. He has answered every single question he has been asked this year, and he's doing a solid job. So definitely deserves it more. Both great competitors, both would be worthy champions, but I think Martin just nicks it for me.
The funny thing is, the narrative around Jorge Martin is he's the Saturday guy, he's the pole guy, he's the sprints guy, and he's all of the time quickly on the pace. But different numbers when it comes to the sprints on the Saturdays, he's won 7, but Bagnaia has won 6. And Paul's is 7-5 favoring Martin, but still that's more close than you'd think. But if you break the things down, the problem for Bagnaia was that he had a real scruffy beginning of the season. He did win in Qatar the opening race on the Sunday, but already on that Saturday, his feeling problems started that we have heard him talk about during the season so much. During that sprint, he was complaining about tire vibrations, and he finished 4th. Then came Portugal, 4th again in the sprint. It actually took him until the 7th race of the season, and that was in Catalonia. From my head, the 7th race of the season to finish on a sprint podium, and by that time Jorge Martin had already racked up some wins. So it was the first phase of the season was just too much trouble for Bagnaia. He had 3 DNFs in sprints from I think it was Jerez, Le Mans, and then Barcelona. So there were too many no scores and too many issues in that first phase of the season. And although he recovered points wise, it just shows you, and that's what Matt was pointing out too. It just shows you that Bagnaia has trouble getting up to speed, like approaching the weekend as if it's only the Sunday, and as if he has all Friday and all Saturday to set his bike up and to get up to speed for. But it's not like that anymore, and it's not even that weird, because this is only the second season of every weekend having a sprint race.
Yeah, you could argue that he maybe has to be used to it now, but that's a really good point and good stats there, Jules, as well. So actually, pace-wise, it seems like it's very, very similar between them. You look at the ultimate things, it's pace-wise, but Bagnaia said it himself, didn't he? It's a championship of mistakes, and that's what's made the difference. So 24 points then, the lead. We will be going into a final round showdown, wherever that may be or whenever that may be. But we're going to wrap up this podcast now, as always, with some awards. We're going to go for Rider of the Weekend. Trumpets are going to go to you first. Quickly, who was your Rider of the Weekend?
It's going to be Quartararo for both the Saturday and the Sunday, getting back on that bike. And I saw him walking. I'm an old man. I know what that is. I know he's paying the price. And I'm glad he's got a little time to recover after. But that was above and beyond, and I was very impressed.
I think you may have stolen somebody else's there. Sweaty Danny, I'll go to you next then.
Yes, mine's not stolen this week. I'm going to go for Jorge Martin. Absolutely brilliant all weekend. Obviously lost out to Bagnaia on the Sunday, but I think showed what he's made of. Showed again he's a good shout for the championship.
Jules, so I don't steal your reserve.
I'm going to go for a bit of unconventional one. I'm going to go for Jack Miller, who didn't restart the race. I mean, in all our consternation about the great title fight, we didn't even mention how the race was red flag. And it was just, if you saw the replays of how he got tangled up in Quartararo's rear wheel, it's insane that he was walking down the pit lane not too long after. And so yeah, really, really happy to see that, because we could have had a whole different weekend.
Absolutely. I was just about to say, yeah, we haven't talked about the crash at all. We've just been, that opening battle was so good in the Grand Prix that we completely forgot about the crash. So it's so good to see Jack Miller was fine. He was briefly knocked out. He said he went for a little sleep. He's quipped. So yeah, that's why they're obviously taking their time with that. So really good to see him get away pretty much unscathed from that. So my rider of the weekend, oddly, I'm going to give it to Bagnaia. I'm going to give it to Bagnaia. I think the crash was really unlucky and not much of a mistake. And then he threw down the gauntlet and he absolutely stood up and did what he had to do again on the Sunday. So a mistake into excellence, as we've seen so many times this season. So going on to moment of the weekend then. Jules, I'll let you get in there first so somebody doesn't steal yours. What was your moment of the weekend?
Thank you. My moment was the shot, the image of Gigi Dall'Igna and Tardozzi picking up Bagnaia in the pit lane after he returned there after his crash on Saturday, because to me it said that they had conceded more or less that this was the championship lost. I thought it's real sympathetic to like, wait for him and put their arms around him, but I thought it was a picture telling more than words. Like, okay, we bow our heads and this is it.
Yeah, nice one. Win and lose as a team. Trumpets, what was your moment of the weekend?
It's got to be the cool down lap after the Sunday race where Martin rode up to Bagnaia and they just had that non-verbal exchange, which was basically like, yeah, no, we didn't. Yeah, we put it all out there and oh my goodness, but yeah, you're not getting anything from me. I'm winning this thing. And they both had that exact same thought.
It was good. And it's good to see some camaraderie. As we said earlier, that was like a polite 2015 battle when the riders didn't hate each other, Danny. What was your moment of the weekend?
My moment, unfortunately, even though it was your rider of the weekend, was when he hit the deck, Bagnaia. Gutting. Didn't see it coming. Wasn't what I wanted to see either. So ashamed to see him hit the deck. Kind of took the spice out of the sprint race for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And my moment of the weekend, we didn't get on it, was actually going to be the crash and then seeing Miller walking, but like, I was generally concerned. I think everyone is a big Jack Miller fan. He seems like a great guy. And the fact that it was so long and, they got the screens up on track and it's like, oh no, this is bad. Like he's really hurt. And then when we saw that bit of the replay, they didn't show it all, but you could see his head had gone into the tyre. And I'm just like, oh no, this is awful. This is really, really bad. This track is bad form for bad things happening as well. No one can forget Marco Simoncelli. And I was like, oh no, not again. So then to see him walking next to his wife, Ruby, and sort of looking quite chipper and chirping and sort of smiling and walking down the pit lane, that was mega to see. That was really mega to see. So that was really good. So that wraps up our race review of the Malaysian Grand Prix. There is only 2 more rounds to go. And in those 2 rounds, Trumpets... Oh no, 1 more round to go. Sorry, 1 more.
2 races, 1 round, 1 weekend.
2 races, 1 round. That's what I was going on about. Good save. So where can people follow you, Matt?
Always at MattPT55 on the socials. And if you're looking for me on Facebook, Matt Trumpets.
Well, Danny, where can people get you?
You can find me at Danny Henney F1 on X.
And Jules?
You can follow me on X, and the Twitter X handle is at Jules Seegers.
Brilliant. And why don't you give the show a follow again at Mr. Apex Moto? And while you're there, give me a follow as well at Kyle Power F1. As we've said a couple of times, there will be a final round. We don't know when it may be. At the moment, it is loosely penciled in for Catalonia, Barcelona in a couple of weeks, but the rain has started to come down in there. My cuñado, my brother-in-law, lives right next to the track and he sent me some videos of some pretty insane rain. So again, all our thoughts are with the people and the victims and their families over in Spain. It's ghastly what's happening over there. We hope things improve and get better for you guys soon. So we will be back to review the final round whenever and wherever that may be. As always, thank you for listening to Mr. Apex MotoGP.